Welcome to Off the Cuff with Kel, Conversations from the Front Line, a podcast and live show for survivors and the leaders who support them. I'm your host, Kelly Humphries, a survivor of child sexual abuse, advocate, author, speaker, ambassador, a lover of all things outdoors, with over 15 years of law enforcement experience. Please support me in my mission to break cycles of abuse and trauma. You can help by donating to my Patreon account at patreon.com/Kelly Humphries. G'day guys, and welcome to another episode of Off the Cuff with Kel. We're up to number 8, and I'm so excited tonight that we've got the incredible Neil Milton from Child Safe Australia here with us. Hello Neil, how you going?
Hey, I'm really good. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Oh guys, so I'm a Child Safe champion, very proud to be, and I've known Neil for quite some time now, so I'm pretty excited to get into our conversation, but I am just going to drop it in there. We're probably going to be talking about some stuff that may be triggering. So if you are, the content is upsetting for you in any way, I do have some support numbers on my website. So I'd love you to jump on there or reach out if you need some assistance. So there's quite an extensive amount of support groups there, guys. So yeah, so jumping right in, Neil. So thank you so much for being here. You've been busy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's always busy. It's great.
Guys, so Neil, if you don't already know, is passionate. He does a lot of work. So Child Safe Australia works with organisations and making sure that they're safe for children and for vulnerable people in our communities. And they do fantastic work. So they're a not-for-profit as well. So they're always looking for donations. I'll be sure to pop up a QR code later. So make sure if you're on board with that and you'd like to give some money to Child Safe that you're ready when I do pop that up. But yeah, Neil does like everything. He's a social entrepreneur. He really has a heart to break cycles, I think is probably the best way to say it, and does what he can in his way to sort of stop that from happening. And he's a survivor as well, which is how we've really connected at a real soul level, Neil. So I thank you always for being such a good support.
Oh, look, it's an honor. It's an honor. Like, I really believe in what you do, Kel, and I love that you come on board as a champion, but also really love the fact that you're a huge advocate and you stand in the gap for people, and I'm really honored to be on this show so we can talk about some real stuff.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Neil. Thank you. So Neil, I want to start probably just to get everybody to know you a little bit more and a bit about your story, if you wouldn't mind sharing with us at all.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I've got a different type of story, if you like, from a lot of people, I think, and that is that I am a child sexual abuse survivor, particularly, I guess it's different because the abuser was a child. I was 10 years old, and this person befriended me in secret, and no one even known that we were even connected at all. And we used to play a whole bunch of games and things like that as kids did at 10 years old. And I'm not sure how it changed, but it very quickly changed into sexual behavior. And early on, I kind of went to someone that I trusted, an adult, and I just said, look, is this what friendship is? Is this what you do? Like, this is what's happening? And they said, oh, no, you're just experimenting. And unfortunately, that abuse continued for another 3 years. And I guess the thing for me is that I didn't realize that it was abuse until I was 21 years old, and I was having a conversation with this guy who was kind of wrestling with some stuff, and I mentioned, this friend and what happened with this friendship, and he just sort of stopped me and said, hey, mate, you realize that's abuse, right? And I was like, no, I went to a trusted adult, and they sort of said, yeah, no, I'm just experimenting. And so I just kind of That's the reality. What I didn't realize is that it took me back after sort of really realizing that it was abuse. I really started to reflect on the experience, and I started to think about what had actually occurred. And I remember after it had stopped and he just sort of, had his way and then left, if you like, used me, if you like, used and abused, I think is probably the best term. I remember sitting in my home, sitting with an encyclopedia, right? An old style encyclopedia. I'm 44 years old. I know I look young. I appreciate that. But yeah, 44 years old. And I remember sitting there at 13 and with a encyclopedia, and it was just at the same time, very similar time as Magic Johnson came out and said that he had AIDS. And so I looked up AIDS and realized that the behavior that we were doing and what was actually going on, and all the symptoms, well, I looked at those symptoms and I thought I had every single one of them. Right. So I'm 13 years old, sitting there in my home, knowing I can't talk to anyone about this. I obviously didn't have any trusted adults in my life that I could trust and talk about this. Sitting there with all this information going, how am I going to get through this? What do I do with this? And I don't know what happened, because honestly, I pretty much blanked out from there. Like, I just don't have a memory of how I got through that. I think I sort of reasoned myself. I questioned my sexuality. I did a whole bunch of things in my mind. And I realized that actually, no, I'm not gay. And I've got these symptoms. What does that look like? And maybe there's not as many, or I don't know. I'm not really sure what happened. But, excuse me. But I just kind of dealt with it, I guess. And what I mean by that is I just started living, and I didn't know that I was abused, like from 13 all the way to 21. So I didn't realize that. But in reflection, what I didn't realize is that because that trusted adult didn't listen to me and take it seriously, it actually set me on a trajectory in my whole life to try and get my voice heard. And so career, relationships, everything. And it was only about 3 or 4 years ago that I actually realized that my voice is valid no matter what, and that I'm enough as a person, as a man, as a person, and that even though I've been abused, I'm still enough as a person, and I'm not too disgusting or anything like that, like I'm not too damaged to make a difference and to move forward and to be okay. And so I think it was about that time that I started really speaking up about my story, and I found that it really resonates, especially because it's a child on child, which we now know it's projected to hit like half of all abuse is like it's going to be child on child. So because of a number of different factors, but yeah.
Wow, Neil, I've heard your story before. We've spoken before, but I've never heard it like that. You've seemed to have done so much work and introspection since we last spoke, and I just want to acknowledge you and thank you for sharing like that. I think that's so beautifully put, and I think for any men particularly out there who are hearing, I really think that'd be very powerful. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
No worries.
It's interesting that you say this, and I'm literally just reading Shannon Malloy's autobiography, and there's a lot of parallels in your story and his story that really align. I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to get him on here as well. So, I really feel for a lot of people who have struggled with peer-to-peer child sexual abuse and not actually recognizing that what has happened was abusive, harmful, or not okay. And I know the work that you do with Child Safe Australia is bringing a lot of awareness to that. So you've turned this darkness into something really powerful, and I just think that's so cool. I do.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I need to, confess something, and that is that just after I found out that I was abused, I actually started a journey of forgiveness. And this is kind of the weird thing. And this is what a lot of people go, how do you do this?
Yeah.
And I went on a journey of that, and I can say I 100% forgive that person. Right? I do. I forgive that person. I don't really believe that a 10-year-old, or he was about 12, I don't really believe that he knew exactly what he was doing. I believe that he was probably being abused by his grandpa. I'm pretty sure that I just have a tweak in my head about that. However, what I've learned about forgiveness is that just because you forgive, it doesn't mean you're not angry. And it doesn't mean that you don't feel shame. And it doesn't mean that you don't get flashbacks. And it doesn't mean that you don't have disassociation sometimes and have to bring yourself back to the land where we are now. It doesn't mean that all those different things, right? And but it does mean, I think from a mental capacity, I think I've been able to, I guess, not be impacted with mental health concerns or the physical impact, if you like, as much, I think. And forgiveness is, I think, and this is my story, I believe that the forgiveness side of things has played a part in that. And I'm not saying that was an easy process. In fact, that was very, very difficult. And I think I'm probably really only fully starting to move forward in dealing with it in the last couple of years. Like, even though I'm 21, I'm now 40, so 20 years on, even after forgiving that person, I reckon I'm just working for Child Safe Australia, seeing the absolute destruction of organisations. I think honestly, I think that for me has probably prompted the next layer of healing, if you like. And I just really believe that there is. It's not just like, oh, you might forgive that person or whatever it is, or you might start some psychological work or whatever it is. I think personally that there are layers to moving forward. It's not just I've been abused and I forgive, or I'm better now. I just don't know if we're ever fully better. Like, I'm not sure. I'm happy to be corrected on that, but I'm not sure. And I'm not even sure if that's what you're meant to be, like whether it's meant to be getting better. I think it's that you just learn to live with what happened, and you're okay with yourself more than you are the circumstance. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%. And it's interesting. There's so many things that you're saying that I'm just like, oh, that is just, it's so good. Like, I was on recorded a podcast with someone last night, and he was interviewing me actually, and we started talking about forgiveness, and he asked me something about whether I had forgiven my perpetrator, and I actually couldn't really answer the question because I don't know. I haven't actually, because what normally happens with me is I don't think about the stuff I'm ready to deal with. I just kind of like disassociate from it, like you were talking about disassociation.
Yeah,
I just
sure.
kind of like, I don't go there, but I know that I've forgiven myself. I've done a lot of work on me, but I'd love you to talk more about what that forgiveness has meant for you and what that looks like for you, because I think for a lot of men, typically very angry women too, like any of us who've been through these experiences, who they're like, no, I'm not going to forgive them, I'm never going to forgive them, and they just have to like hold on to this anger and bitterness. And I guess, like, I'm just curious as to what your definition of forgiving that person means and what it looks like.
Yeah. Look, I think for me, it means that that person doesn't have a hold on me anymore. Like, that I actually recognize this person abused me, but that abuse doesn't have a hold on me. Like, what he did, if he was in the street and he was bleeding out, about to die, I wouldn't look at him and go, that person abused me. It would be like, I need to help that person. He's a human. However, I just want to make it very clear. This is me sitting here right now, right? But the reality is that I don't want to hang out with him. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to be around him. I don't want to ever see him again. I don't want to hear his voice. It makes me sick thinking about it. And also, I think for me personally, he was a child. Like, I think, and I'm not saying that like that children don't know what they're doing, but I'm saying that I think maybe in my reasoning, maybe in my reflection, I just kind of feel like he was a kid. He was only, 12 years old, 11, 12 years old, and a lot more mature than I was. And I think, he was being taught behaviors, and I think also he was wrestling with his own sexuality, and he just used me to decide. The school is massively at fault for introducing us and not patrolling the toilets and those sort of, they have a lot to play in that. For the organisation has a lot to play in that. So I think that's kind of where I've sort of reasoned with it. And I don't remember a lot anymore. Like I remember parts, but there's a lot of, like I said, I don't know how it came from innocent games to him being naked on top of me. I don't get that. I don't understand how it switched so quickly and how I allowed that to happen. I don't understand, every single lunchtime being in the toilets and being naked in the boys' toilets and things like that. I don't understand how it went from that to this. Like, I just don't get it. I can't reason in my head how that actually happened. And it's a journey.
Yeah, I can imagine. Look, if I could put any insight on that, I think anyone with those types of behaviors, there's always a lot of grooming, as you know, that happens. Even a young person can groom another young person. And we don't always kind of work out where that switch over happened, but it just happens, and you're like, well, how did I get here? And it's kind of this whole confusion around that. And I think, Neil, I was going to ask you this later, but I'm guessing this is a lot of the reason that you do Child Safe Australia, that you have this heart to make organisations accountable for making sure children are safe and, having the right procedures in place. And I've gone further into your story with you, just even in the first, not even 20 minutes of this podcast, and we've had in all of our years. I feel like you've just exploded in your growth and your healing, and it's just really powerful, Neil. It's awesome. It's really awesome.
Yeah, I think, people ask me all the time and say, oh, how'd you get into Child Safe Australia? And to be honest with you, like, I was working for a large NGO, felt like that wasn't the right thing, so I went. This job came up, right? And I thought, I can do this CEO kind of GM role, and I thought I'll give it a shot and things like that. But it wasn't until a year later into working for Child Safe Australia, I was in South Australia. I was in a hotel, and at 3:00 in the morning, I bawled my eyes out, and I gave my wife a call, and I said, honey, I need you to know that that this Child Safe Australia thing, like, it's really hit home to me. It's reminded me, it's actually really reminded me of my own story, and I just need you to hear it. And so I began to pour out my heart to Kate, my wife, and in tears at 3 a.m. in the morning, and then realizing that it took a year into this business to realize actually my story could actually, I could actually, if I got a hold of being able to talk about it, it could actually really be an influence. And so now my focus in the business, as not just leading the whole organization, but it's actually being the chief advocate to actually get organizations to understand what they need to do to keep children safe. And what I want to be really clear on this, right? The government says legislation, child safe standards, national principles, all this sort of stuff. And this is what organizations are hearing. What I'm trying to bring them back to is this understanding that you need to start at a place of recognizing the impact of trauma on children before compliance. And so what I mean by that is if a child is sexually abused, the reality is that it could be a life sentence. It could be a full stop on their brain development. It could be, mental health disorders. It could be, body image issues. It could be a whole bunch of different things, right? And emotional, relational, a whole bunch of impacts. And when we understand that and we start at that point, then therefore compliance is like a no-brainer, right? We just go, yeah, of course, that's part of the process. We've got a structure now of doing that rather than just, oh, yeah. But you don't even need compliance if you understand the impact, because you go, I don't want to see a child ever to be abused ever in my life, and therefore I'm going to do everything I can to stop that. And so that's my voice. That's where my voice comes in, because I can speak from a place of reality because I'm living that. I mean, one thing for me, I was sitting there with one of my staff members, and yeah, he made a sound, like it was just like a breathing sound, and then he made a noise with his lips. So he didn't know he was doing it, but right that moment, it took me back to when this kid was abusing me behind me, and I had to actually reason with myself and go, I am actually here on this earth right now. You know what I mean? Like I had a bit of a disassociation for a couple of minutes and go, hang on a sec, like I just had to bring myself back. And that takes a lot of hard work to get to that place. And someone once said, you know, when you're in that place, you should look from high above, like a bird's eye view, and go, what would you say to that person going through that?
Yeah.
And so for me, that's where I go now. I go, okay, if that happens, I go, okay, I'm here. I am here. I'm on this earth. I'm okay. And so I know what it feels like from my perspective to be impacted by this trauma long term. And so therefore, if I can get that across to organizations, then maybe they'll just do just the bare minimum even to stop that happening, you know? And so that's what I'm talking about on podcasts and conferences and things like that, because I feel like it's resonating now because people have forgotten the why they keep children safe rather than what they have to do. And so I want to bring back to the why. And I guess that's the heart change that we're wanting to see get across.
Oh, Neil, you've just grown so much. Like, I just want to give you the biggest hug. I just got goosebumps from just like you've just turned into this, well, you're already a warrior, but holy hell, like you've just come so far. And I haven't had a good chat with you for probably 18 months, 2 years, probably like this. I mean, we've chatted, but not like this. This is just, oh, wow, that's so fantastic. Thank you so much. I totally agree. It's why I do what I do, and you're definitely right. Just to be reminding people why they do what they do, because you know, myself, even working in the industries and with the stakeholders that I work in, we are so consumed by process and box ticking and making sure we get it right, so we don't miss something. That at the end of the day, we're kind of missing the most important thing, or you're kind of forgetting bits and pieces that are actually really important in the whole like flow of things, or the process or the procedure that needs to happen. And often the kids are sort of like you're trying to bundle them all into a system, but everybody's different, right? You can't kind of like, no child is the same, no child's needs are exactly the same, and we have to really I think tailor interventions very specifically for the child, like for the individual child. And then to reflect that back through the organizations, that's definitely really powerful. I'm looking forward, we're both speaking at the same conference in a few months. I'm looking forward to hearing what you've got to say, Neil. So it's very exciting.
Thank you.
Yeah, wow. I know you've got so many things, irons in the fire, I guess, at the moment, and I know you've started a table talk project, and I'd love you to talk about that, because I titled this podcast "Encouraging Conversations" because Neil used to have a company, only just stopped recently, called Positive T-shirts, and it was about encouraging conversation around suicide and those types of things. And you know, we all know how powerful conversations can be and how important, but I find that for me, particularly being a survivor, I find it hard to have confronting conversations. I find it hard to talk about what I need, to say when I'm not okay. I can tell the rest of the world, but for the people that are close to me, I'm like, I don't want to upset anyone, you know, like, and so I kind of keep a lot of stuff to myself. You've kind of mastered the art, I think, of this encouraging conversations, and you know, you've got a story there, and I'd love to pull some insight from, you know, you've found courage in so many different parts of your life to speak up and to share, and then to bring that into these projects that you've now got is just so cool. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so I had Positive T-shirts, which was social enterprise where I gave all profits to preventing of suicide. And I kind of started that because when I was 20 years old, I witnessed someone suicide in front of me. I was working in a shoe store in Adelaide, and someone suicided, jumped in front of our shop and died. And it was flipping horrific. I was 20 years old, and you know, it was just awful. And I had some counselling and things like that for that. And when I was in between jobs, I thought about starting a social enterprise and just to start a conversation about topics that people don't want to talk about, like mental health and suicide. And so I started this clothing brand, and within that process, between 20 and maybe 35, I had 5 or 6 people actually suicide in my life, and one of them was my cousin. And as a gift to his parents, I said to him, I'd be happy to do the funeral for him. And so I did the funeral. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And you got 300 of his mates, and I talked about mental health and the importance of actually talking about what's going on in your life rather than keeping it to yourself. That strength is actually talking about it rather than keeping it to yourself. That's weakness in some ways. And so because when you talk about it, you know, a problem shared is a problem owned in some ways, you know, and so we can actually get through it together. And so anyway, but we had positive t-shirts for a while, and 5 or 6 years, and I just did some research around whether it was really working. You know, in business, there's a lot of opportunities where you have to research and really ask the hard questions like, see, this is great and people love it, but is it really working? You know, is it really setting out the goal that you wanted? And my goal was to start a conversation to save a life, but I couldn't measure that. I couldn't measure how many people would stop me in the supermarket and say, where'd you get that Talk Out Loud t-shirt? And, you know, what's that about? And they'd tell me their story or their child's story, or, you know, about their journey of mental health or suicide prevention. And so we started researching around where people might be having these conversations, and realised that over 90 families across Australia weren't talking about suicide at all. They weren't talking about mental health. They found it really difficult to talk to their kids because they didn't want to put anything in their heads. They didn't realise that most probably they'd heard about it before. Anyway, so long story short, we came up with, out of research, we came up with an idea that is about supporting families to have conversation around a dinner table. It's a social enterprise called the Table Talk Project. So tabletalkproject.org. And basically what you do is it's about empowering people to have a voice, right? And it's interesting how stories are connected, because about a year before I launched, I only launched a couple of months ago, a year before I launched it last year, I was actually sitting there with my leadership coach and my strategic advisor, and we were talking about it. And I started going on a journey about my own story, and particularly around the fact that I didn't feel like I had a voice at the table at all. We sat at the table to eat dinner, but no one ever talked. You know, like, I hated vegetables, but if I didn't eat vegetables, I'd get a smack, because back in that day you did. And so I'd just sit there and, you know, and then I don't remember once having a conversation about anything deep. I don't remember once ever being asked about my day. I don't remember anything like that. And you know what? I couldn't trust anyone anyway. You know, it's just my journey. It's where I was at. And basically, I realized as I started to research with some other people that were part of the team, we realized that that's actually a lot of people's story. They didn't feel like they had a voice at the table, you know, and it was seen and not heard. And so I was like, well, I don't want that experience for my kids. I've got 3 kids, and I didn't want that experience for them. And so anyway, so we developed this tool that is effectively some structure around dinner, which looks at entree, main, and dessert. The entree is the food we eat and prepare, and we provide the recipe. The main is the conversation starter, and we provide those conversation starters. And then the dessert is 3 questions. Did you feel listened to and heard? What attitude are you leaving the table with? And is there anything else you wish to share? And that's a really important question, because what we find is a lot of kids, they struggle to really communicate straight away. You know, sometimes they're quite reflective and needing to actually do that. And so we encourage that once a week, and the benefits are massive, like massive. And so, you know, there's been research out of Harvard, 20 years out of Harvard research, out of Massachusetts, there's a huge research institute out there that did research for 20 years around the importance of eating and the benefits of eating together as a family. And they are huge, from image-based abuse reducing, eating disorders, healthier eating, better addiction for kids and understanding from that perspective, better vocabulary for children, drugs and drug addiction reducing, all those different things. And the other part of the Table Talk project is that we have a library and we provide all the resources for particular conversations or different conversations that you might be having. And a young person might say, hey, I am struggling with my sexuality, or you know, what their parents might feel that or hear that. They can go straight there onto our website, go to the library, and they will be able to have those conversations. The other part is about the Table Talk Cafe, which is part of it as well. And basically once every couple of months, we join together and we eat together online and we have a conversation and we do the Table Talk project together. So it's about a support network where we're building longer tables and smaller fences. So really the whole premise of the Table Talk project is empowering or supporting families to have conversations around food and to make sure that everyone has a voice at the table.
That's just so good, Neil. I love it. I think it's just one of those things, like I've found that young people, they talk best to you when they're in the car. They can't escape, right? So I found it's like one of the best ways to have a conversation. But, you know, everybody's got to eat, right? So it's a really good opportunity to get people together. And I just think that's fantastic. Look at the girls have got that up already. So there you go, guys, the tabletalkproject.org, if you want to have a look at that. So fantastic. So Neil, that's awesome. I just I want to just ask you a couple of things before we go any further, and that was around your disclosure and who you were able to tell and that sort of stuff. If you could just elaborate a little bit on that, and after that, just maybe some tips for men who haven't disclosed yet, what they could maybe be considering, or anyone really, but specifically, obviously, like I don't get as many men on here as I'd like. So if there's male survivors out there who are listening who'd like to have a voice, let me know. But yeah, just I know it's very difficult for men, and the Australian child maltreatment study was just released, and I felt quite appalled at the statistics, but I also wasn't surprised at the same time. We've known, particularly working in this space for a long time, that the stats were never accurate. It's only ever what was reported, but I feel like this is the most, I guess, closest reflection of what might be the reality. But I'm still thinking that it's not the same for men. So it's actually 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 5 men or boys before the age of 15 are sexually abused. And, you know, I actually personally believe it's a lot more men. I kind of do believe that 1 in 3 is probably about right for girls. Awful, I know. But it's kind of what I see in my work and what I'm hearing. But I'm interested in your perspective, Neil, what you think.
Yeah, look, when it comes to disclosure, I, you know, when I did talk about it, I made sure I talked about it with people I trusted. But it took a while for me to get to a point where I could actually discuss it. Remember, I held on to it since I was 13 until 21. And I would never go back to that trusted adult again and talk about it, because I still believe they'll give me the same answer. Because, you know, I think that's just how they grew up, you know. And unfortunately, that is the reality. And so I think the thing is, what I would say, the people that I talk to about it are people that I trust and people that I know that won't judge me, that will just listen and be there. I mean, I've had situations where I have actually told some people, and I just get over it, just move on. Just keep going, you know. And you know that, like, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but that shits me, man. You know what I mean? Like, I just feel like you just don't get it. And the other thing is as well is that, like, I hear disclosures like weekly, right? Like I hear them weekly, like maybe 4 or 5, sometimes a week. And I thank our company that we actually have EAP, Employee Assistance Program, where we can talk to someone that is independent. And I think the thing for me is that you know, I think if you're not a survivor and you hear a disclosure, the best thing that you can do is just listen and have empathy. You don't have to have sympathy, because sympathy is actually really bad when it comes to this sort of thing. You need empathy. Empathy says, I can't understand what you're going through, but I'm willing to walk the journey with you, right? And, you know, and I've had people that I've spoken to that I thought that I could really trust, and they haven't even like followed up with me and said, oh, you know, thanks so much for sharing that. How are you going today? Like, are you doing okay? Or it's like, oh, you share it once and it's like all of a sudden it's like, because you've shared it, therefore it's done. You know what I mean? And I think the thing is, I think there needs to be more compassion and empathy for survivors. And I think a lot of people don't speak up because, one, there's so much shame attached to abuse. You know that. I mean, Kel, you've talked about that so many times. There's so much shame, even though you might feel enough, even though all that's like, the reality is you can't escape shame from abuse, because that abuser has tried to make you feel that way often, especially adult abusers. And you try to make yourself feel that way as well. It's somehow a coping mechanism. We go, oh, well, we're disgusting, or we're this, or, you know, all that sort of stuff, you know. And even though, you know, in our mind, we can't reason with that. And from an outside assessment, you go, no, you're not disgusting. You're lovely. You're amazing. Or you're a courageous person. No, but I'm full of shame, like full of shame. And it's hard to reason with that. But I think the thing for me is that, yeah, if you're going to listen to someone, or you get the privilege, and I'd say that you have a privilege if you listen to someone who shares and discloses. If you get that privilege, the best thing you can do is say thank you. Thank you for trusting me enough to share that with me. Like, seriously, please listen and take that time to do that. And also not just say thank you, but acknowledge the fact that, gee, you must have had to be pretty brave to say that. Hey, I just want you to know that I don't take that for granted, and I want you to know I'm willing to be on that journey. And I think just acknowledging that is a very, very, very big thing. I think what I struggle with massively is I've got some trust issues, to be honest with you. You know, and that's the impact for me. It's trust. And also the other thing is that I value friendship so much, so I don't stuff around with people that don't give a shit anymore. You know what I mean? So if people don't want to talk real and be honest about who they are, and just be real and just get down to the nitty gritty, if you like, then, like, to be honest with you, like, I don't need extra baggage in my life. I just need people that I can reciprocate, and they can reciprocate to me, and we can be honest and real. And while we're sitting there having a drink, we're being real. While we're going for a drive, we're being real with each other. Hey, if you're having a shit day, tell me you're having a shit day, and I want you to know that I'm going to be there to listen, you know, that kind of thing. So I just think, you know, it's about time, particularly men, we've got actually real, because you know what? There's too many people asking about the weather, but there's not enough people talking about their mental health. And I think it's really important that we get honest and real with that. And when it comes to disclosure, then if you have the privilege to listen, then just be compassionate and empathetic, please.
Yeah, Neil, you just said so many nuggets in there that are just so good. Like, I 100% agree with everything you said. I think I've probably said it in many different ways, not the way you just said it, but that was just so good. And you're right. I feel like, I think it's possibly a bit of an Aussie thing too. We're sort of always like harden up, princess, 100%. You know, like this whole tall poppy syndrome. As soon as you start to kind of stick your neck out, we're so quick to cut each other down. And I really hate that, because there's a lot of people suffering at the moment. There's a lot of people really doing it tough. And, you know, the biggest thing I think survivors need is just that validation, and to say, you know what, I hear you and I see you in this. And But if you're going to say that, you don't just say the words. When you hear someone, you listen, and you understand. You try to understand, or you say, I don't fully get where you're coming from, but I'm, like you said, willing to walk the journey with you, or I'm willing to try to understand. If you can help me understand where you're coming from, let me know how I can support you through this. And I've I've had people so close to me, Neil, to say, why don't you just let this go already? I'm sitting here doing this kind of stuff, and sticking my neck out, and I try so hard, like, to just keep going and just to keep showing up, and I do that because I know that the minute that I stop, I'm gonna fall apart, right? So I just keep going and I keep digging in. But to other people, to many in my close knit people, they think that I just haven't let this go, right? It's not about that. I do this obviously the same reason you do this. I want to see change, but when they say that, when people say things like, you haven't let this go, or why are you still going on about this, or, oh, you already told me that. I hate that. You already told me about that. I'm like, yeah, but I just need to talk more about it. Like, I need to kind of, but as soon as someone says that, they're kind of dismissing your need to share more, or to, there's just something more that you need from that conversation. And you're right. I often talk to people about tribe and being seen and heard. And if those people in your life are not safe people, so safe people meaning, a husband or a wife, or even family, like we've had familial abuse. Sometimes, people haven't said anything, and that abuser continues to pop up at barbecues and Christmases, and you have every right to say, no, I don't want to go, or to say, I'm not comfortable with this, and for the people in your life to listen to you, right? We don't need those toxic people in our life, and it's very hard to put your foot down and say, hey, this is not a good relationship for me, or this is not okay for me. And to cut those people out, like, if they're not willing to be a safe person, they're not willing to listen and to be part of your journey, they're not your people.
No,
people. And you're so right, Neil. And just quickly, how do you make those decisions for yourself? Because I know it's really hard. I've got a lot of women in my support group that really find it really difficult to cut those people out. And I know we've had these conversations before. I'm curious what decision-making process you go through to decide that.
Yeah, look, it's not that I won't give them the time of day. Like, it's not that I won't, just hang out or whatever it is, but I quickly learn whether they want to be real or not, and I might just drop something little, just something little, not necessarily about surviving and stuff, but like, hey, like, how's your mental health going? They go, whoa, well, yeah, good, man. Yeah, good, man. Yeah, no worries, kind of thing. Yeah. And so, hang on a sec, hang on a sec. See, here's the reality, right? And this goes to the answer to your question. Men particularly have grown up in a society where what I call the Dermot Brereton syndrome. Now, if Dermot Brereton is on, I don't mean this in a negative way, all right? But Dermot Brereton was, played with 3 broken ribs in a grand final of football. Now, all the men go, Flip, that's amazing, fantastic, awesome, right? The problem is that we walk around with 3 broken ribs all the time, and what I mean by that is it's not broken ribs. There's stuff going on mentally. There's stuff, but we play on. We just play on because that's what society's taught us. Yeah. The problem is, the reality is that we are, that's killing people. Like, we've got a suicide rate, 9 a day. And over 50% of men, like, wake up. We have to wake up. We have to help men to talk. We have to actually help them to talk about what's going on and give them the tools to be able to do that. It is not weak to speak. It is not. And it is so important that we actually do talk about it. And so for me, I'm real with people. I am who I am. There's no mask anymore. Do you know that vulnerability, right? Vulnerability is actually a term that is used in battle. And what I mean by that is, in the olden days, you used to have an armor on the front and on the back, right? Breastplate and a backplate and all that sort of stuff. And you go in with your spear and your swords and you go into battle, right? And people would try to pierce you and they couldn't pierce you, right? Vulnerability is actually going into life without armor on. It's actually going, you know what? With the people that I want to be real with, I don't need to have an armor on. And I'm open to people attacking me or hurting me or whatever it is, or saying things or whatever it is. Like, that's what true vulnerability is you're open to be attacked, but you're not going to be, because the people around you are going to make sure that you're not, and you're going to be okay. And I think that's the thing, is that we need to get vulnerable. Men need to get vulnerable and real. And the only way we can do that is teach them and educate them. So when I talk with my friends, like, people are freaked out by the fact that I actually ask them how their mental health is. I don't really get asked that question ever. No one ever asks me, oh, so Neil, how's your mental health going? Now, I'm feeling pretty good, to be honest with you, but on that day, I might be feeling pretty bad, you know? They don't know what's going on. And, you know, the number one thing that people tell me of people that have suicide, I never knew that it was this bad. I never knew that they were going through that much pain. I never knew about those things. And I think the thing is that the truth is you probably didn't, because often we don't really go deep enough to actually find out what's really going on.
It's so good, Neil. You just said so many bloody good things. This is so good. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much good content in this. It's just amazing. Like, I just love that whole concept of the armor thing, because you're right. Like, we do, being vulnerable is so brave. It is really brave, and you don't always know what you're going to get. And we kind of expect to get kind of ribbed now and, like, you know, teased or something to happen. But, you know, to be vulnerable really does take courage. But yeah, we do need to help our men to have better conversations. So maybe just, have you got any quick tips? We've got a couple of questions to answer before we finish up, but just to help our men, the men in our lives, to have better conversations. You know, what words of encouragement or tips would you have to you know, help that process?
Well, I think you need to choose wisely. You need to choose wisely of who you're going to open up to, because you're putting yourself out there, right? But there needs to be a culture that is in your friendship group where, if you have a drink, that's fine. But make it a drink in a conversation where you actually say, hey, look, tonight I just want to know how you're really doing. And I don't want good. Like, I know you're not good. So how about you tell me what's really going on, and I'll be a person that can listen to you. Now, when I've done that, I've found that, you know, it's a bit scary, to be honest with you, because you really don't know. But if you've got a good enough friendship with someone, then you're able to ask those tougher questions. And I think people appreciate it. You know, in mental health first aid, it's one of the first things that they talk about, saying, you know, you listen to someone, and then you say, you know, if they are projecting things that are that maybe are a bit scary, if you like, about themselves, or they might be giving you cues like, I'm just going to sell up everything. Hey, look, you know, thanks for your friendship. I love you heaps. And, you know, I'm leaving my job, by the way, and also my marriage, you know, like a number of different things. You might say, hey, look, I just want to be really honest with you, mate. Are you doing all right? Because you don't seem all right. And they might talk a little bit, and then they might say, and then you might actually say, hey, have you thought about suicide? I know it's a bold question, but you know what? I'd rather ask the question than stand there at a funeral, to be honest with you. I would prefer to ask that question. So I guess getting alongside people, being real and honest, being willing to journey people for who they are, and not being afraid to ask the tough questions. That is what you're actually seeing in front of you, and maybe what's not just in front of you, but a little bit deeper than that.
It's so interesting you say that, and I have done the mental health first aid training, and it's brilliant for that, just some of those tips that you've just given. But it is so important, because people aren't really willing to ask those questions. You're right. Like, they kind of shy away, thinking, gosh, I don't want to, you know, say something to make them more upset or anything like that. And I think it's so important to have that conversation, because you're right. It doesn't happen anymore. We don't want to kind of upset each other, particularly like our partners. Even we don't do that. We don't want to rock the boat. We don't want to piss the other person off, or So we sometimes leave a lot of things unsaid. And,
Yeah.
you've given me a lot to think about, even, Neil. It's pretty good.
It's good. Well, on the website, the Table Talk Project, you can click on news, and there's actually a blog on there, how to get men to talk around the dinner table. So have a look at that.
Oh,
and check
that's
it out.
awesome. Actually, while we're on it, guys, I'm just going to pop up that QR code. So for Child Safe Australia, and while we're doing that, Neil, I think one of the questions is what Child Safe Australia does for organisations. So did you want to jump into that while we leave that QR code there? So
sure.
just tell us a little bit about what Child Safe does.
Sure, yeah. So Child Safe is a not-for-profit harm prevention charity. We work with organisations to prevent harm and abuse of children. And how we do that is because there's child safe standards, because there's a culture they need to develop around creating child safety. What we do is we create resources and support for organisations to not just meet legislative requirements, but to create the culture that children deserve. And as I said before, I focus massively on helping them understand the impact of trauma, and then before compliance, and so helping them to understand the why before the what. So Child Safe Australia has been around for over 15 years, 16 years actually, and we've created safer environments for over 330,000 kids. And that's a pretty modest number, really. That's just the auditable number that we can kind of say, because that's organisations that are being part of us and have the children in their care. And so prevention is a really hard topic. How do you know how many kids you've really saved their life? You don't know, right? But we know that when organisations partner with us and using our tools and services and being supportive and those sort of things, lives can change, and we're seeing that. One initiative that we're going to be launching pretty soon is a new book. We partner with Janine Sanders called My Body, What I Say Goes. We've actually partnered with an Indigenous artist, and we're actually launching that into a whole bunch of different schools to help young children, particularly Indigenous children, to understand what the 5 body safety rules are, how important it is to understand this is my body, what I say goes, the body parts, and a safety network and those sorts of things, so that they can actually protect themselves as well. And the educators in the schools do that educating for them. And it's an amazingly, beautifully illustrated book. And we raised a bunch of money for that, so that we could actually buy those books and then give them to schools for free who do our training within that. And so, that's the sort of stuff that we do. And also we partner with different sporting clubs and associations in order to further a cause, to make the big difference. And I guess for me personally, I'm that chief advocate. So I'm in those spaces like the disability sector and the early learning sector and those sorts of places to try and create change, and real change, not just like tokenistic change.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you for that. So we'll just jump into a couple of questions. We've just got a couple of minutes left. So the first one is, did you think you forgave your perpetrator because he was a child at the time rather than an adult? I think you might have covered that, but
yeah, I think that was part of the reasoning. I think, but maybe it wasn't. I'm not really sure. It was a long time ago, but I think I just realised that I can't hold on to what he did to me, and allow it to grab hold of me any longer. It shaped so much of my life, and I didn't realise it until I started with Child Safe Australia. So it's a bit of a catch-22 in some ways, working for Child Safe Australia. Like, you have to deal with your own stuff as well. It's hard. But I think, yeah, when they were being a child, I really don't believe they fully knew what they were doing. That's what I think. I think he was really trying to work out his own sexuality, and he used me as a pawn. And because I was vulnerable, I had no friends. I was the person that you would choose last unless it was sport, because I was good at sport. But I would be the guy that would never get picked in class, and they would know that. And often groomers do. They know who to pick, the vulnerable, because the reality is that they can often do what they want because they're seeking love and affection. And I think I was probably keen to have a friendship, because I'd never had one, and people would pay me out, and I was bullied and those sort of things. So I think when someone showed me affection, I kind of wanted to engage with that, and that was something that I did. But I'm not sure that he really knew exactly what he was doing, being only 12 years old.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I'd love to, like, maybe on a separate podcast to chat more about that, because I often believe that, it's particularly in the love languages and stuff like that, is when we're not getting that particular need. Perpetrators are so good that they pick up on those needs, and then they actually will exploit children based on
Yep.
that deficiency that child, like, if it's physical touch, if a child really craves physical touch, perpetrators somehow like know this, and then they
I do.
exploit it, and they
Yep.
find a way to build
Mm.
that connection with the child using the language that they need to feel that connection and to build that, like, rapport and all that sort of stuff. So I think you might be someone who can talk quite well to that.
Mm.
So yeah, but
For sure.
it is such a
Mm.
big, there's so much to unpack in all of this, and you've given us so much to think about tonight. I think you've probably answered even the last of these questions here too. So it's probably, if we stop there, otherwise we can talk probably for hours and hours about so many different things tonight. But just a couple of things. So guys, that Table Talk Project website again will just pop up on the screen. It's the tabletalkproject.org. So if you're keen, jump on that. If you wanted to make a donation to Child Safe Australia, I'll just pop that up real quick again. Guys, they do fantastic work in making sure that children are safe in, like, sporting clubs and social groups, and really building a framework for organisations to keep kids safe. So any help that you can give them would be fantastic. Thank you so much, Neil, for being here tonight. Like, you have just shared and grown astronomically and just shared so powerfully, and I'm just so proud of you, and I'm so grateful to you for being on here tonight, and just how far you've come in such a short time. Really, like, you've just, wow, goosebumps.
Yeah. I'm great. I'm grateful to be on here, and I'm looking forward to seeing the impact of this chat, and if there's anything that people can take away from it. Just know that you're really loved, and you're enough as you are. And if you're a survivor on here, please make sure you tell someone. Like, don't live till you're 80, 90 years old and then say, oh, by the way, I'm a survivor. Like, tell someone, work through it. And I'm already proud of you. I'm cheering you on.
Yeah. I think a lot of survivors struggle so much because they just don't think it gets better for them. And it does. It really does. It takes a lot of work, but you've got two people sitting in front of you who've done a lot of work and have found a lot of joy in life, and people in life that, are just amazing. There's amazing things out there for you. And, Neil is very open. I'm very open. So if you need anything, just reach out to us. And guys, just for the purpose of this off the cuff with Kel, the reason that we do this, the reason that this podcast exists, is to have these conversations, to bring hope, to bring healing, to bring different people on board, so that you can kind of find yourself in our stories. And, we know we're not alone. For a long time, I thought I was, until I started to talk about it, and I realized, well, holy hell, there's so many of us. And Neil, I'm sure it's the same for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important for us to be able to talk about what's going on. I think, a voice gives voice to a voice, if you like, and so if you're able to speak up, then the truth is someone listening might then have the courage to speak up, and then that person might have the courage, etc. And I guess that's maybe why I've been able to build that courage to be able to speak up, and so that other people can have that courage also. Because you know what, if this conversation impacts one person, then it's a win, right?
Absolutely.
And I think our stories, if we're able to speak up, the reality is that that it could really help someone and might even save their life, because there could be someone that is just right there going, you know what, I can't get through this by myself. I've been holding on to this so long. I need to talk about it. And so,
yeah. Thank you, Neil. And thank you guys for being part of the live show. If you're here listening, for your questions, your comments, your feedback, please, if you're listening, just make sure you drop in a comment, let us know you're here. And we just absolutely appreciate you being a part of this. If you would like to support this work, guys, I have a Patreon account. It's www.patreon.com/Kelly Humphries, and your support will actually help me continue to do these live shows. So if you can, I would love you to do that and be part of the Off the Cuff with Kel membership group. All right, guys. So we'll see you in probably 2 weeks' time. Thank you again, Neil, and thank you guys for being part of the audience. See you next time.
Thanks, Eve.